Defense Applied Recombination Biology Division, DARBD, Joint Oversight, Shadow Concord, Clearance, Obsidian, Document Status, Retroactive Analysis, Date, 19th of June, 2026, Origin, Genomic Anomalies Review Committee. Title, Addendum 7C, Post-Borealis Genomic Anomaly Review, Quiet Marker. Reference Events, Project Borealis, Containment Breach, P0 Escape and Subsequent Resonance Emergence, Pre-Resonant Anomalous Incident Archive, 2019 to 2025. Executive Summary. This addendum documents the identification of a previously unrecognized atavistic carrier phenotype revealed through post-Borealis retrospective analysis. The phenotype was not detected prior to Project Borealis. It could not have been. Its existence was inferred only after the emergence of resonance following the escape of P0, when earlier anomalous incidents, previously dismissed or misclassified, became contextually legible. The phenotype has been provisionally designated Quiet Marker, QMKR. Background. Prior to the Project Borealis containment breach, DARBD screening protocols operated under the assumption that atavistic activation was gradual, latent carriers exhibited detectable prodromal indicators, absence of resonance equated to absence of risk. These assumptions were invalidated following Borealis. Post-escape resonance modeling demonstrated that atavistic expression can exist in a fully suppressed state, undetectable by pre-Borealis methodologies. This realization prompted a full re-examination of the Pre-Resonant Anomalous Incident Archive, 2019 to 2025. Pre-Resonant Incident Reclassification. Between 2019 and early 2025, DARBD logged multiple isolated anomalies involving individuals cleared as non-carriers or benign latent carriers. At the time, these incidents were classified as psychological decompensation, environmental stress reactions, instrumentation error, statistical outliers. They were not designated resonance events. They could not have been. Following Borealis, 9 of these incidents were re-examined due to structural similarities observed in post-resonance failures. In 4 cases, individuals previously cleared by all available screening protocols were later identified as activation focal points, not peripheral casualties. Retrospective genomic analysis. Using Borealis-era microweave modeling and revised mitochondrial coherence mapping, analysts identified a shared anomaly across the reclassified cases. Key features included exceptionally stable mitochondrial regulation, complete suppression of predatory phenotype expression, absence of resonance bleed signatures, epigenetic structures consistent with active inhibition, not dormancy. The suppression mechanism exhibited lattice-like coherence, self-maintaining, and energy-dependent. Analyst note: this isn't inactivity, it is restraint. Failure mode identification. When suppression failed, failure was sudden, global, irreversible. There was no evidence of gradual activation, hunger phase, psychological fragmentation. All atavistic traits manifested simultaneously. This failure pattern does not correspond to any previously documented carrier class. The committee formally designated the event catastrophic unquieting. Post-activation characteristics. Post-unquieting subjects demonstrated immediate situational awareness, high executive function, controlled predatory behavior, tactical decision-making under stress. Notably absent were panic responses, identity confusion, emotional distress. Field reports consistently note, quiet marker subjects do not awaken, they resume. Relationship to P0 and resonance. Quiet markers are not dependent on resonance for activation. However, resonance fields associated with P0 destabilize suppression mechanisms at significantly greater distances than observed in standard carriers. Hypothesis, unconfirmed. Quiet markers may represent a phylogenetically older expression state, adapted for prolonged concealment within non-atavistic populations. Resonance does not create the condition, it removes the margin of safety. Operational implications. 1. Pre-borealis clearance records are no longer reliable indicators of non-atavistic status. 2. Quiet marker identification is currently possible only through post-activation analysis. 3. Long-term observation protocols must assume silent carriers. 4. Borealis escalation models must account for non-signaling activation vectors. Final note entered into record. The absence of noise was misread as safety. It was concealment under ideal conditions. End of Addendum 7C. Defense Applied Recombination Biology Division, DARBD, Joint Oversight, Shadow Concord, Clearance, Obsidian, Document Status, Crisis Synthesis, Date, 2nd of October, 2026, Distribution, Restricted, Leadership, Contingency Planning. Title: Containment Failure Brief, Global Atavistic Escalation, Resonance and Quiet Marker Unquieting. Reference events: P0 Escape, January 2026, Initial Resonance Manifestation, Romania Resonance Event, Global Quiet Marker Unquieting Cascade. Executive Overview. This brief addresses the irreversible escalation of atavistic expression events following sustained resonance exposure and widespread quiet marker failure. What began as isolated, containable anomalies has transitioned into a distributed, self-propagating crisis. Containment is no longer a matter of secrecy. It is now a matter of crowd dynamics, information velocity, and mass psychological destabilization. Phase 1. Resonance Emergence, January to February 2026. Following the escape of P0, resonance manifested as a low-level, non-local field effect. Initial impacts included elevated activation rates among known carriers, increased severity of post-activation phenotypes, breakdown of suppression mechanisms in high-proximity zones. At this stage, events remained geographically clustered, field teams successfully enforced silence, public explanations remained effective. DARBD assessed the situation as manageable. This assessment was incorrect. Phase 2. Quiet Marker Unquieting, March through May 2026. The first quiet marker unquietings occurred outside known carrier populations. Key characteristics: no prodromal indicators, no prior flags, no predictive behavioral markers, full expression within minutes. These events occurred in civilian environments, transit hubs, workplaces, and private residences. Subjects previously cleared as non-carriers began manifesting advanced atavistic phenotypes, often exceeding baseline carriers in control and efficiency. The assumption that atavistic risk could be screened out collapsed. Phase 3. Containment Saturation, June through July 2026. By mid-2026, incident frequency exceeded containment capacity. Key failures included insufficient response teams, delayed interdiction windows, jurisdictional conflicts, competing national secrecy frameworks. Civilian footage began circulating faster than takedowns could occur. Independent analysts correlated incidents across borders. Language patterns stabilized across platforms. The internet did not reveal the phenomenon, it pattern matched it. Phase 4. Pandemic Level Expression, August 2026. Atavistic expression events reached pandemic scale frequency. Characteristics included multi-city activation clusters, secondary activation via proximity stress, copycat violence driven by misinformation, vigilante responses against suspected carriers, Collateral deaths unrelated to actual Atavus expression. Quiet markers were disproportionately represented among high-impact incidents. These events were filmed, live-streamed, and occurred in crowded public spaces. They could not be plausibly reframed. Failure of obscuration. Suppression mechanisms failed due to volume of recordings, mirrored uploads, encrypted dissemination, civilian forensic analysis, emergency responder leaks. Censorship attempts accelerated distrust. Public psychological response. Observed reactions include mythologization, religious and apocalyptic framing, false symptom identification, violence against innocents, population movement away from hot zones. The public no longer asks if something is happening, they ask how long it has been hidden. Government realization. By late August 2026, multiple governments independently concluded, this is not terrorism, this is not mass psychosis, this is not containable through secrecy. This is a biological atavistic emergence event at civilizational scale. Coordination transitioned from covert influence to emergency stabilization. The era of denial ended by exhaustion. Concluding assessment. Resonance created the conditions. Quiet markers supplied the acceleration. The internet removed the lid. This is not an invasion, it is a reappearance. Final entry. We did not fail to contain it. We succeeded for as long as physics, biology, and human communication allowed. End of brief. House Varn internal circular. Distribution, inner coils only. Clearance, blood seeded. Date, 11th September 2026. Archive status, sealed. Unauthorized duplication prohibited. Subject, on the end of veil conditions. We write this without embellishment. The veil is no longer intact. This is not a failure of secrecy, nor a lapse in discipline, nor the consequence of any single breach. It is the predictable outcome of scale exceeding tradition. What we face is not exposure. It is saturation. Historical context for the record. The houses have survived empires, inquisitions, industrialization, and global war. We survived because the population was slow, communication was localized, records decayed, fear fragmented narratives. We were never invisible. We were unconfirmable. Those conditions no longer apply. Current state. Resonance has altered the operating environment permanently. Quiet marker unquietings have introduced a variable we did not cultivate and cannot fully predict. Atavistic expression now occurs in public, on camera, without warning, at a frequency that resists narrative suppression. The human world is no longer blind. It is watching in real time. On Darby D and government partners. The agencies believe this is a crisis of governance. They are mistaken. Governments fail when belief collapses. We fail when pattern control collapses. The internet has become a hostile archive. It remembers, it correlates, it mirrors, it does not forget. No denial lattice can erase millions of witnesses comparing notes. On quiet markers. Quiet markers represent a structural shock. They were not bred, they were not trained, they were not sworn. They do not belong to us. Their emergence confirms what some denied. The old blood learned to hide without permission. Quiet markers do not seek houses. They do not wait for instruction. They resume. Strategic admission. The era of absolute concealment has ended. This does not mean extinction. It does not mean surrender. It does not mean revelation on human terms. It means adaptation under exposure. The question is no longer how do we stay hidden. The question is, who do we allow to define what we are? Directives, effective immediately. 1. Cease reliance on veil-only protocols. Assume observation in all engagements. 2. Discontinue quiet marker recruitment attempts. Unauthorized control efforts will be sanctioned. 3. Preserve lineage archives. Public history will be rewritten. Our history must not be. 4. Prepare for declarative containment models. Some truths may require framing rather than denial. 5. Remember this. Humans fear what they can name. They destroy what they believe they understand. Final entry, unsigned. We were kings of the dark because darkness was empty. It is no longer empty. If the world must learn that predators exist, we will ensure it learns which predators endure. End circular. At first, people thought the worst part was the violence. The videos were bad enough. Grainy phone footage of impossible strength, of men and women moving too fast, of eyes reflecting light wrong, of blood where blood should not be. Those clips spread like any disaster footage did. Shared, argued over, denied, replayed until numbness set in. But violence was familiar. Humanity knew how to process violence. What broke the world came later. It started with documents. Not manifestos, not threats, internal memos. They appeared on forums, then mirrors, then everywhere at once. Dry, precise language stripped of drama. They spoke of houses, of lineage, of veils, of protocols that did not read like the improvisations of a new crisis, but like maintenance routines for something very old. People noticed the dates first. Centuries appeared casually in the margins, references to previous concealment cycles, to industrial era adjustments, to pre-national governance conditions. No one bragged, no one explained. The authors wrote as if continuity itself were mundane. The question changed overnight. It was no longer what is happening. It became how long has this been happening? Historians were the first to feel the chill. They began cross-referencing instinctively, almost compulsively. Trial records, unexplained disappearances, noble bloodlines that ended too cleanly, treaties that collapsed for reasons never fully explained. Patterns emerged that could not be unseen. Names reappeared across centuries like fingerprints. Symbols once dismissed as folklore now read like administrative marks. Folklore itself began to rot under scrutiny. Stories about monsters no longer looked like superstition. They looked like leaks, corrupted eyewitness accounts filtered through fear and religion and time. The Atavus were no longer framed as creatures. They were framed as institutions. Governments tried to speak. Press conferences were held. Carefully neutral terms were floated. Non-human actors, biological minorities, pre-modern survival populations. None of it held. Language designed to soothe collapsed under its own weight. Because one fact could not be negotiated. You do not survive this long by accident. If the Atavus had endured empires, inquisitions, industrialization, world wars, then they had not merely hidden, they had participated. The implication detonated trust everywhere at once. People did not just lose faith in governments, they lost faith in history itself. Wars were reinterpreted, leaders reassessed. Entire national myths curdled as the idea took hold that humanity had never been alone in steering its fate. And no one could say where human influence ended and something else began. Online, the fracture became visible. The internet did what it always did. It sorted fear into tribes. Some called for coexistence, arguing that survival proved legitimacy. Others demanded extermination, framing the Atavus as parasites who had stolen the human story. Religious movements splintered overnight, scripture rewritten in comment sections and live-stream sermons. Millions claimed they had always known, clinging to prophecy as proof they had not been fooled. The most dangerous were the betrayed. They saw conspiracy everywhere. Bloodlines became suspect. Family trees were interrogated. Old photographs were scrutinized for faces that appeared too often across generations. Innocents were accused, some were killed. Ironically, true Atavus incidents declined in certain regions. Not because the threat had passed, but because humans had turned on one another first. Panic no longer needed monsters to feed it. The breaking point came quietly. Not with a new attack, not with a declaration. It came with a sentence that spread without attribution, passed from post to post like a whispered truth. If they were organized before we had nations, then history was never fully ours. That idea hollowed people out. The fear was no longer of death or even domination. It was the fear of irrelevance, that humanity had been a junior partner in its own civilization, never fully aware of who else had been seated at the table. The Atavus did not need to announce themselves. Their age did it for them. By the time official channels acknowledged the existence of non-human organized actors, the damage was done. The world had already learned the deeper truth. The unquietings were frightening, but they were survivable. What humanity could not survive, at least not unchanged, was the knowledge that the dark had been inhabited all along, and that the predators within it had names, rules, archives, and patience. The monsters had not arrived. They had been waiting, and now, finally, they no longer needed to hide. The emergency session was never supposed to be broadcast. That was the first mistake. The chamber filled anyway. Delegates stiff, translators pale, security layered so thick it bordered on ritual rather than protection. No flags were removed, no symbols altered. Humanity insisted on its stage. Then the lights dimmed. No one announced the speaker. The figure appeared on every screen simultaneously. Not imposing, not monstrous, not visibly inhuman. If anything, the restraint was unsettling. Neutral posture, stillness that felt practiced across centuries rather than rehearsed. When it spoke, it did not raise its voice. And every translator paused, just for a fraction of a second, before continuing. Televised address, transcript excerpt. Representatives of the human polities, we speak to you now because the conditions that once made silence useful no longer exist. You have observed us. You have named us. You have inferred what you could from fragments. This is sufficient. A murmur rippled through the chamber. The speaker did not acknowledge it. We are not an emergence. We are not an infection. We are not a collapse of your species. We are a lineage that predates your nations and has endured alongside them. The phrase alongside them landed harder than any threat. You call us Atavus. We have had other names in other centuries, spoken with more fear and less accuracy. We will not correct your myths. They served their purpose. Outside the chamber, millions watched. Comment sections froze, then flooded. The address continued without interruption. Your current crisis did not begin because we chose revelation. It began because concealment ceased to be structurally possible. Resonance did not create us. It revealed us at scale. Several delegates were already taking notes they would later deny writing. You fear that we have ruled you. This is incorrect. We have influenced, intervened, and occasionally constrained. We have also withdrawn, endured, and adapted. Your history is yours. It is simply not yours alone. That sentence would be replayed for weeks. The speaker folded its hands, not in supplication, but in closure. You are not facing extermination, nor are you being offered salvation. You are facing coexistence under observation. A pause, deliberate. Some of you will demand war. Some will demand submission. Most will demand certainty. We offer none of these. A delegate attempted to interrupt. The feed did not cut, but the audio never reached the microphones. Understand this instead. We survived because we learned restraint before you learned governance. Those among us who failed at that lesson are the ones you have already seen. A subtle distancing, quiet marker unquietings reframed without apology. We are not united. We are not innocent. We are not leaving. The final lines were spoken slowly, carefully calibrated for translation. You have discovered that the dark was inhabited. Now you must decide whether you will respond as a species that panics or as one that adapts. The speaker inclined its head, not a bow. This address will not be repeated. We will be watching your response. The feed cut. Immediate aftermath. No applause, no shouting, no explosion, just silence, followed by the loudest panic the world had ever experienced. Markets crashed within minutes. Governments issued contradictory statements within the hour. Religious leaders split publicly on live broadcasts. Military readiness levels spiked without clear targets. But the most disturbing reaction came from civilians. Not fear, recognition. The Atavus had not sounded like invaders. They had sounded like neighbors who had finally acknowledged the fence was gone. And humanity understood, all at once, the true meaning of the second horror. The monsters were not here to conquer. They were here to stay seen.